By you kind of articulating what you've done and how you can help, now you're starting to get them to think more specifically, okay, how can this person be plugged into our organization? And then they're going to drive you into the talent process through talent acquisition versus you applying to a dark hole.
All right, we're live. Thanks everyone for listening. You're on another episode of Life Sciences 360. And today our guest on the show is Mitch Robbins. He is the founder and managing director of Anthony Michael Group, a life sciences recruiting and search firm that specializes in helping companies find and fill quality assurance, regulatory affairs, and clinical roles. Welcome to the show, Mitch.
Hey, Harsh. Thanks so much for having me, man.
Yeah, is that a good introduction? I know you're doing a lot of stuff, like your LinkedIn is, you're always popping up on my feed. Do you want to add anything to that? I know you're working on other projects as well.
Yeah, no, that's great. So really that's the core foundation of the business is working with medical device, digital health, and diagnostics organizations across the U.S., helping to build highly competent teams in regulatory, quality, clinical, like you said. And then we have a rapidly growing commercial practice in market access, reimbursement, payer relations, national accounts, et cetera, across all of the life sciences. So absolutely.
Interesting. That's some terrific growth that you have going on in the company. I want to ask you this. How did you end up in recruiting? Because every person that I know in this field has their own unique story. There's a lot of similarities, but there's also a lot of differences. So what's your story?
Yeah, I don't know if I've yet to meet one person coming out of high school or out of college saying, I'm going to be a headhunter. That's what I'm going to do. It's kind of one of those fell into it professions, very similar actually to the folks that I've met in regulatory affairs as well. But my story is, man, it goes back almost 15 years ago at this point. I was living in Minneapolis and I had left my corporate job years prior and traveled professionally in a rock and roll band, which is kind of a whole nother story, but we were pretty successful and got to the point where I felt like, okay, I feel like we've pushed it as far as we can from a professional standpoint. I was getting back into the workforce, the corporate life, so to speak. And I thought about going to law school. And I walked into a recruiting and staffing agency in downtown Minneapolis, asking if I could get somehow involved in a clerkship in a law office to see if that's what I really wanted to do for the next 4 years as far as time and energy and money going to law school. And when I was there, I said, would you tell me more about what you do? Because I don't really know, but I knew in the back of my mind that for years, my mom had always said, hey, I think you'd make a great recruiter. She was actually referring to campus recruiting at the time because I don't think she knew what a headhunter did either. But she, in her mind, was thinking about the folks that go onto campus and talk to prospective college students about joining their company. And when I asked her that, she said, hey, as luck may have it, we actually might have an opportunity right now if you're interested. So she left the room, came back and said, you know what, we don't, but I'm going to keep your information on file. I'll keep you posted on any types of clerkships and if there's an opportunity to talk about joining our company. And so right at that same time, I was doing a apprenticeship for a commercial real estate appraisal organization. And that was towards the end of 2008, which if you know anything about our history, that time period is kind of when everything collapsed and so many layoffs were happening. And I was part of that. The commercial firm at the time was losing a big chunk of their business. And he's like, look, man, I appreciate having you around. I just can't do it anymore. I can't afford to have you here right now. And that exact same week, I got notified from the search organization. Are you still interested in possibly joining our company? We have an opening for a researcher. And a researcher, for those who aren't familiar with the role in a search firm, is those who kind of build lists and review resumes and really kind of tee it up for the recruiter. And so fast forward, I ended up joining the company, but within 2 weeks of being there as a researcher, they're like, this guy's not a researcher. He's picking up the phone and making calls out of a phone book, recruiting people. And so they kind of flipped me into a full-blown recruiter where I was supporting a search practice doing logistics, transportation, and supply chain, and kind of built out the U.S. arm of an international practice at the time. But it was really kind of chaotic. We lost our boss within a month or two of being there. We had a district manager who really didn't pay attention to the local practice as much as he could have, and I didn't really have much mentorship. So it was truly, truly kind of trial by fire. And then I stayed there for about a year and cold called my way into a search firm here in Denver, moved from Minneapolis to Denver. doing for the next almost 6 years doing hospital leadership recruiting. Became a senior partner there. And then it came to the point in 2015 where I decided to venture out and build from scratch what is, like you said, the Anthony Michael Group.
Right, right. Yeah, that's a fascinating journey. So tell me a little bit more about when you said researcher, were you like finding like the top talented people for a specific role and then telling others in your company like, hey, you guys should talk to John, Sandra, whatever. Like what were you? Yeah, you were finding the top talent in the market.
So the structure of that initial position was more so look on the job boards and see if you could find relevant resumes, make sure that our position's posted, build a short list of talent that the recruiter can call. But what was happening is the recruiter was pretty darn busy too. So I just started picking up the phone and kind of just took the initiative and really enjoyed kind of the hunt, so to speak. And then that's how it morphed into them realizing a couple weeks in, like, hey, this guy's not really built to be a researcher. He's built to be a headhunter like us.
So if you go back in time as you were calling or, contacting these people, do any 2 or 3 traits come to mind specifically for quality assurance and regulatory affairs roles where you talked to someone and saw these traits and you immediately knew, yep, this person's going to be fit for a QA or RA role?
No, I mean, keep in mind, I didn't really get into regulatory and quality until I started the Anthony Michael Group. And if you're asking me, like, do I see traits in common for high performers in quality, are you saying?
Yes.
I could answer that from what stands out as a high performer. So high performers have outcomes that they can clearly articulate from their experience. So what do you always say? Where have you made money, saved money, or improved a process? Okay. Because think about this, especially in quality, people come in and the role of quality is very similar from organization to organization. If you're a quality specialist in one company or you're a quality manager in another company, the idea of what you're responsible for is very similar, right? But the outcomes that you achieved in that role as a result of that responsibility are what separate you from the next person. And if you can articulate that, here's how my role impacted the business in a positive light. Here's what we did to save an organization when it came to our, 483s, our warning letters. Or here's what we did to achieve ISO 13485 certification. Or here's what we did to handle all of the CAPAs in X amount of time. And from start to finish, be able to say, here's our situation, here's our solution, here's our outcome. Those are top performers because they can articulate not only their experience, but how it applies to the forward progression of a business. Does that make sense?
Yes. And that's what I was going for. And I got that advice early in my career from a lot of recruiters and people working at firms like you worked in your past. And I wasn't getting the right response from companies and from the talent acquisition teams. And that's exactly the feedback that I got was, hey, your resume has all the skills, but it doesn't have the outcomes you've achieved by applying those skills. And just by writing the skills, you can't really get your foot into a door. Like you have to show your future next employer, what can they predict? What outcomes can they predict from your past?
So if I could chime in with just one more thing about that, about the resume piece. Too often we see resumes written like a job description, but the inverse of that, right? It's basically taking the job description, or I shouldn't say the inverse. I should say I've literally seen where people look up their job description with their company and they use those as the bullet points on their resume. You need to think about your resume from the vantage point of who you want to read it and who you want to have an emotional response from. So the emotional response is going to come from the prospective hiring manager that has a pain, has a vacancy on their team, and needs desperate help from somebody like yourself with that expertise. And so if you think about where you're benchmarked in an organization for your performance, whether you meet once or twice a year for formal reviews, what are the things that you are held what are you benchmarked on in terms of what are you supposed to deliver, right? And that's really a good place to start with the bullet points. So I would be light on explaining the scope of your responsibility and heavy on the outcomes that you've achieved as a result of that responsibility. And if you can really kind of back into your resume from the viewpoint of the hiring manager and make it super clear as to what you do, what pains do you solve, what challenges do you solve, you're going to be that much better off.
Agreed. Yeah. And I've seen the results of making this change. So I wish I did it sooner, but that's history now. So and now when you're working with hiring managers in medical device or just in life sciences, different kinds of roles, what are some of the challenges that you're seeing in finding talent?
So I would say a couple of things. There's so much white noise in the market as it is. And I don't even mean just the job market. I mean our lives. Think about how many different alerts that you have just right now in front of you, Harsh. You've got, the text messages going off. You've got your email going off. You've got banner ads on the internet that are trying to get your attention that are flashing. You've got, your family responsibilities. You've got your current work pressures. Everybody's got so much noise in their life. And so when it comes to challenges of recruiting, it's really how can you take your message, your quote unquote employer value proposition, and rise above the noise to where somebody is able to stop dead in their tracks and say, you know what? It's kind of a no-brainer for me to at least vet this out and have an exploratory conversation to learn more. What about your opportunity is so differentiating, so unique, so compelling that somebody should stop dead in their tracks versus the next quality role that's right down the street from your competitor? And I think when it comes to writing job descriptions, I've beaten this to a pulp as far as you've got to be creative. You've got to look, just how I was saying with your resume, think from the vantage point of the hiring manager. When you're recruiting, you got to think from the vantage point of the candidate. What message is going to resonate with them? It's not about the responsibilities, a paragraph about your organization, cultural values, the responsibilities and the requirements. It's more so by joining this organization, here's the priorities you're going to get to work on right away. Here's who you're going to get to work with and why that's important. And if you do a good job, here's what's in it for you, from a career growth perspective, right? And so back to what you said, what are the challenges? Number one is attention. How do I get the right people's attention, and how do I get them to take action? That's probably the most important or the most fundamental challenge that's happening right now.
And that's an interesting segue into my next question, or the next topic that I wanted to go into is you've mentioned how life sciences recruiting or just recruiting in general has changed. I remember when I started in the industry between 2008 and 10 or 11, when I was early on in my career, I wasn't even active on LinkedIn. At that time, I think Glassdoor was very popular. Indeed was very popular. So, I was just sending resumes, and I would send 10, 15 and nothing would work. And I would change something and send it again. Now I laugh about it when I think about it. But the question I had for you is, with all these platforms, all the tools, social media, emailing people, what sort of creative approach have you seen from companies or from hiring managers in getting that attention, right? Because everyone wants the top talent, but not everyone's going to get it.
Sure. So I would say this is twofold. My response to this is twofold. It works for candidates who are willing to go the extra mile. Let's say that you've recently been laid off. You're trying to figure out, how do I get attention for myself? Because as of the time of this recording, Harsh, if you look on LinkedIn and you look at some of the job posts, these job posts are getting anywhere from 50 applications to 600 applications, because all walks of life who have been laid off are doing what we advise not to do, and that's called spraying and praying, right? Spraying your resume and praying that somebody gets back to you. So now it's even more important that how do I rise above that type of noise to get myself, in my experience, recognized and responded to, okay? And then on the other side, we talked about how do you rise above the noise to get the right candidate's attention. The answer to that is leveraging content to the best of your ability, a couple different ways. And I'm sure you're a proponent of this because I see your stuff all the time. You want to start building community. You want to start engaging with people that you're trying to get attention from. You want to engage in their content. You want to leave thoughtful responses, leave that leave that comment. You want to leverage video where you can. If I'm a hiring manager and I know that I'm building my team right now, what's going to create more engagement, more response? A quick selfie video from me posted on LinkedIn talking about who I am, what I'm trying to do, and what's in it for this person, or a simple message that says, so-and-so is hiring, do you know anybody, right? So building that personalization, the know, like, and trust factors can be accomplished. We call it the buyer's journey, right? How do you get somebody to know you, like you, trust you before they can buy? that can be expedited through content and through engagement with others' content. Because if you're out there branding yourself, not just corporate speak, not just fancy posts and corporate videos in with a green screen, we're talking about real life. Just pick up your phone, do a quick selfie video. That's how people get to know you and like you. And I would encourage candidates to do the exact same thing. Don't be afraid to reach out to the hiring manager directly on LinkedIn, connect with them, add some value first. What can you think about what you can do to add value to that person's life based on what type of company they work for and what their situation might be. But don't be afraid to stick your neck out with video. It's huge right now.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I have two backstories on this. First, I had a guest on the show. I don't want to give their name out yet because their episode is going to be released sometime. But I was asking them the same thing, and they said, yes, if you are shooting all these type of videos for your corporate marketing and corporate communications, there's no reason why a hiring manager should not be able to shoot a 30 or 60-second video just saying, hey, I'm looking for these 3 roles in the QA team or in the Reg Affairs team. Here's why you should work with my team or our company. And here's what you'll be working on. If you have any questions, email me, or like literally that's all you have to say. It should take 30 to 45 seconds, but not many people are doing it. And you are the second person now that's recommending that approach. And then the other point I wanted to make is, the creative side of looking at roles or separating yourself from other candidates. When I was starting my consulting business to get my first few clients, I had to do that, right? So I had to be creative. I had to go back and look at my network and see all the people I had worked with in the past that I had fun working and they knew what skills I bring to the table. And I just messaged one person and I said, hey, I see you switched this role and 3 months back and you're here and you just posted a role for computer system validation strategy. I sent him a 2-pager, like a 2-page document to say, if I'm not looking for a full-time role, but if you hire me as a consultant, here's what I would do, right? I just send him the 2 pages and he became my first client. So not a lot of people go to that. I had no expectations. I was like, okay, at the most he can keep this document and maybe someday he'll hire me. But I remember still the story. I was at Whole Foods with my wife and he had messaged me back and said, this is amazing. How long will it take to execute this? And I told him like 4 to 6 months, and he became my first client, right? So like maybe you don't need to do that. Maybe not every candidate needs to do that, but think of how you can give them the wow factor right away.
I love that story for so many reasons. And the 2 pieces that I want to highlight is, number one, you gave massive value up front. You weren't saying, hey, I run this business, I'm looking for clients, I charge this amount, let me know if you're interested. You said, no, the guy's got a problem here. Let me highlight what should be done to be able to solve that and give as much value up front as I can, so much that he's like, this is amazing. What do we got to do to move forward? Second thing is, I'm sure it was probably a little bit uncomfortable for you because you were trying to get your first client. Your personal situation was a little bit on the line. And so there was some uncomfort, but yet you still pushed yourself. And so many people push back, especially in this space. I'm not going to stereotype, but I think, again, you'd be hard pressed to disagree with me. A lot of people in regulatory and quality are fairly introverted, and they don't necessarily want to be the face of the business or the on camera. But what I always say is growth is just outside your comfort zone. And if this is a matter of going months on end, reviewing resumes that don't fit the mark with a lot of hot button language, they've done this, this, and this, but when you really dig in, they haven't. Or you can drastically expedite the time it's going to take to get top talent interested and on board by creating a simple 30 to 60-second video about who you are and what you have to offer. Which one do you want to choose, right? And so listen to what Harsh is saying as far as creating that value up front. And if you're a candidate, go out of your way to figure out what's the status of their business. Are they in development phase? Are they commercial? What is maybe some of the challenges that they're working through? And give some insights as to pieces that they could leverage immediately, right? It comes back in spades. It really does.
Yeah, and I agree with this. It's definitely uncomfortable. Even today, like I've been it's less than a year that I started my consulting business. But even today, if I send an email or a message to a prospect that I feel like maybe I have a shot at getting a consulting assignment, it's uncomfortable. But I just don't have any expectations, right? I can send that to 20 people, and if 19 say no, that's fine. I just need one yes, because like in life sciences consulting, the value of one long-term client, and then if you do a good job, you get word of mouth, probably 3 clients out of that one. So I'm more focused on getting that one yes. If I have to go through 20 no's to get that, like, that's just part of the game. And slowly you learn, like, why am I getting 19 no's? How do I get one yes out of 10 messages, right? You slowly learn and you see what catches when you're doing it.
Not only that, but don't forget that the gold is in the follow-up, right? For those that
Right,
are listening,
right.
if somebody doesn't respond and you're like, hey, I did exactly what they said. I created a video and I didn't get candidates, or I created a video to the hiring manager. They didn't even respond. Don't forget that people are very, very, very busy. And so the gold really is in the follow-up. And that's kind of the finesse. There's finesse to how you follow up, but don't forget to follow up.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. One question I get asked all the time. I went to school. I did my master's in reg affairs and quality assurance. I only worked in reg affairs for a couple of years, but then just went into quality. One question I get almost every week, I can't think of a single week that I haven't got this question, is from the new talent that's coming into the industry, people that are just graduating or just maybe has 1 or 2 years of experience in QA or RA. What tips can you share for these people of how can they get their first dream job?
So what I would say is you got to network your butt off, and you got to start early. There's a lot more programs out there now than even just a few years ago that are offering internships. And I think organizations are starting to catch on to the grow your own methodology, meaning, hey, let's catch talent very early in their career and then groom them internally. And we're going to have, opportunities for greater retention. So if you're in college, start tuning into different folks who regularly put out content. Harsh, there's I can name a few others.
Yeah, go ahead. Yep.
Medical device, or Easy Medical Device by Monir El Azouzi, Karen Deep. I'm not going to. His name is hyphenated, but look up Karen Deep online. Do you know how to say his last name?
Karandeep Badwal. Yeah, I've had him on the podcast. Yeah.
Michelle Lott. There's so many. There's a circle of people who are putting out content on a regular basis. All you got to do is Google regulatory and quality consultants or regulatory and quality podcasts or medical device podcasts, and you'll see a bunch of content. Reach out to these guys too, because they're consultants that are entrenched in the industry and they know different types of companies that may have junior opportunities. The second thing is go to major organizations, multi-billion-dollar corporations, and make sure that you meet them at your career fairs. Make sure that you look up regulatory leadership, quality leadership, talent acquisition leadership in these major organizations, and start reaching out to them early and often when you're getting ready to land your first role. If you can get your foot in the door in an internship and do a wonderful job, I guarantee you that's going to open up so many different doors for you going forward. If you're somebody who's got 1 or 2 years of experience, be more specific on that, if you would, because maybe I've got some other advice for that piece.
Yeah. So most of the people that get in touch with me have got the internship, and they're just finishing up, like they're about to graduate in the next 3 or 6 months, or they've just graduated. And actually, the other interesting factor here is a lot of the people that reach out to me are international students, right? Majority of them are from India, so they have visa restrictions. And they have to find a role in a certain amount of time after they graduate. If not, they have to leave the country, right? So it's like a time bomb ticking, where they have to really find something, not only like an internship, but more so of a company that's willing to sponsor their visa so they can stay in the US. So I mean, usually what I tell them is just the same the advice that you gave, is about networking and just reaching out to the person, not being afraid of finding or going to conferences like American Society of Quality or RAPS, all these industry conferences. You never know, you might meet somebody there, and if they like you and they have a role, all you have to do is, hey, are you hiring? Do you have any open positions? right? So yeah, that's what I've been telling people, that reach out to me.
So one more comment on that. You're right. You really set the stage well. Somebody who's in an internship, it's about to come to an end. They don't necessarily have an opportunity internally for that person. They're on a visa, so they have to be sponsored. What you want to do is start with the bigger companies first, because those are usually the ones that, tried and true offer sponsorship. But then when you're reaching out, make sure that you reach out to people in leadership roles who potentially have hiring needs, and explain what you've been able to achieve in your internship. In my internship, I had the opportunity to work on, MPD projects like this, and this, and here's what we did. I worked on sustaining projects, and here's what we did. If you're looking for somebody who can come in and do X, Y, and Z, I'd welcome the opportunity to speak with you. I'm going to be graduating in X amount of time. This is the type of opportunity I'm looking for. Is this worth a conversation? And it's 3, 4, 5 potential follow-ups over X amount of weeks period of time. But if you do that across 25 different companies, I can virtually guarantee you're going to get people that want to learn more, because they're already starting to think about their own hiring needs across the next couple of months. And by you kind of articulating what you've done and how you can help, now you're starting to get them to think more specifically, okay, how can this person be plugged into our organization? And then they're going to drive you into the talent process through talent acquisition, versus you applying to a dark hole where you may or may not be discovered with your application.
Right. Yeah, 100% agree. I want to talk about layoffs, right? I couldn't have this podcast with you without talking about layoffs, especially with everything that's going on in the industry. What have you seen? Is there more talent available, or is there still a talent shortage like most of the times we've seen in life sciences?
So our market is a really strange market right now, because on one end of the spectrum, you've got companies that are hiring full steam ahead as if the macroeconomy news is not even out there. On the other hand, you've got companies who are really hurting right now, who are laying off in droves, even in our space. And historically, I feel like medtech's been pretty insulated from some of this stuff, but especially in areas of private equity, you're seeing that there's been a lot of slowdown and a lot of more tightening of the belt, and a lot of more, I think, organizations almost scared to continue to hire the way they were, right? Where equity firms are demanding much more with less for the time being. There's been a major hit to IVD in the diagnostic space, especially related to companies that were full steam ahead on some of the COVID-19. That's been kind of, where you see a lot of big time layoffs as well. But what I would say is, as much as people are getting laid off in our industry, there's much more demand. And the people that are being laid off, yes, I think companies might be having an easier time hiring really quality individuals, but I think it's a really short window that's going to happen, where there's really highly qualified talent on the market in super technical or historically hard to find functions. But I think that demand is definitely still outweighing supply for sure.
And the question now I have is, there are a lot of people, when you said highly technical, highly specialized people are available. And I know off the top, like 3 or 4 people in my network who've had maybe 10, 15 years of experience, got laid off in the last 6 months. What tips do you have for them? What should they be doing in the next 30 or 60 days? Should they do something on their own, if that's a path, or what would you advise them to do? Because they've never seen this situation. Like, a lot of these people have never been laid off. So it's a mental and different aspects to it.
I'm really glad you asked that question, because it's a really good one that I think I can offer some good advice around. So the number one thing that you should do is stop for a minute and take a deep breath, because it is emotionally taxing to feel like you've put your heart and soul into something, and here you are laid off, right? And it can provoke so much anxiety too, because it's like, okay, well, what's next? How do I get on my feet? I've probably, maybe they've got his family to support. Oh my gosh, I got to get going. First thing I would encourage you to do is take a deep breath and realize it's going to be okay, because there's going to be an opportunity that you're going to land on your feet with in no time that you're going to love. After you've taken that deep breath and kind of cleared your mind for a minute, I want you to ask yourself, what do I really truly want to do? Because now's the opportunity to get it right. where do I get my energy? What types of responsibilities, what types of tasks do I really get energy from, and what seems to suck my energy? And you want to try to craft the epitome of a position that gives you way more energy than takes from you. And the only way you could figure that out is to kind of do a quick calibration with yourself and outline some of the things you've been doing over the last few years and be honest with yourself of where you get your energy. The next thing I want you to do is I want you to get your assets together as quickly as possible. I want you to get your resume dialed in, heavy on outcomes, light on sentences about your responsibility. I want you to get your LinkedIn profile in shape. If you need help or trainings on how to do that, I'm happy to put you in the right direction. But in essence, you want to look at it from who do I want to read my profile and what do I want them to take away from it? Who do I help? And how do I help? And I want you to bulk up the recommendations that are at the bottom. Reach out to people that you know and respect and get some recommendations on your profile to add legitimacy and credibility to the work that you've done. After you've got your assets together, after you understand kind of your ideal type of position, I want you to create a list of 25 to 50 ideal companies that you want to work for. I want you to start connecting like nobody's business on LinkedIn. I want you to start engaging with people's content within that sphere. I want you to get your name out there and present yourself as a giver of value, right? How much value can you offer in the time that you do have off? How can you engage in some of these posts and add thoughtful comments? I want you to start creating an outreach campaign to prospective hiring managers, leveraging video as well, explaining your situation, explaining what you have to offer, and start trying to engage in some of these exploratory conversations that you can set yourself up for. Simultaneously, you can apply online. Just recognize that if you're applying with hundreds of people. And so you've got to have a follow-up system with talent acquisition, with the hiring manager. You've got to let them know that you've applied, and you've got to be as top of mind and as visible as possible. Otherwise, there's a super good chance that your information is going to fall into the dark abyss, black hole of job applications. That's the advice that I would give right away.
Yeah, that's excellent, because you've touched on so many points where work on the mental shift first, just figure that part out, because if you don't have that figured out and you're just like in desperate mode trying to apply for any job that's matching your past job or a level up, you're not going to see much success. And this is not me saying it. This is other people who've tried in the last 3 or 6 months and they've said the same thing. So just, yeah, everything that you said is a really good blueprint for anybody that's going through this. And all I can say is, reach out to people who you know in the past, right? It's not always about who has the job. Just have a meaningful conversation with people on LinkedIn or whichever platform you are, and just tell them like, hey, I've been laid off. I'm looking for X, Y, and Z kind of role. I really don't want to be in this spot, but I would love to be here. You never know what can come out of that, right?
That's 100% accurate. And I highly recommend you do create a LinkedIn post like that. I would go one step further and say, be vulnerable with what happened to you and be as genuine as you can, but then explain how you help. Just like you would write your resume or write your LinkedIn profile, write the post the same way. What do you add to an organization? How can you help? And what is the type of position that you're looking for? Make it as easy as you possibly can on the people that want to help you. Don't make them guess as to what you're interested in and what the experience is that you have.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, we've touched a lot of topics on this one. I want to talk a little bit about what do you like to do outside of work? Because I know that you're talking to tons of hiring managers and candidates day in and day out. What do you do when you're not doing that?
So I have 2 little boys. One is going to be 6 next month in March, and the other one's going to be 8 on July 4th. So my personal time is spent a lot on doing things with them and raising them. I enjoy music. I'm a musician. My goal this year is to try and get back into regular practice and play on my own, which I've really kind of gotten away from over the last few years. So I want to get back into that. And then really, I live here in Colorado. I enjoy what all of Colorado has to offer as far as the outdoors and the mountains, and trying to get on hikes when we can.
Great. Yeah, I haven't been to Colorado. I might have been there once for layover on some work trip, but it's one of the places I want to go and actually spend some time, because I've heard a lot of great things about it.
Well, you're welcome anytime. You and I will get out for a beer or coffee or something, and I'll give you some ideas of what to check out.
Yep, sure thing. And I also want to ask you this, just as an entrepreneur, business owner, a lot of people are feeling this. I have a son, he's 2 years old right now. I saw a post that you made a few days back on LinkedIn where you're trying to process your emotions or everything that you're going through with being a parent and being a business owner. It's like having two children, like, or two things that you deeply care about. Any advice business owners, entrepreneurs who are trying to raise a family and grow a business, how should they go through that phase?
It's tough, man. It really is. And that post basically was just saying, here I was at the park pushing my kid with one hand and on the phone in the other, and how bad I felt. It's like, I want to be present for my kids, but I also have, I feel like these demands that are there with the business. And what I would say is just realize that life is short. And what is the main, at the end of the day, what do you want your kids to remember, right, about you as a parent? And try and remember that even when there's pressures from the business that are calling for your time as well. And I would say right now, my biggest priority is how do I balance to be there for them, but get stuff done at work. We talk about work-life balance. And I always say the idea of work-life balance is it doesn't always mean that everything's balanced. Hey, I spend just as much time with work as I do with my family. Sometimes the pendulum is completely swung. It's like, I'm only spending time with my family right now, and I don't care what happens in my business for the next X amount of time. Or, I'm sorry, I really have to focus on my business right now, and my kids are going to have to wait for XYZ. We're going to have to. And so the point is, you got to find some sort of balance that works for you of where you prioritize your time and when. Just recognizing that do your best to line it up with what you value most. And I think for me, sometimes my actions were getting out of line with what I value the most. And that's what I'm working on right now, is try to bring that back in sync.
Yeah, that's a really powerful message. And you're absolutely right. The whole concept of work-life balance, it's not that you're going to have every day is going to be perfect, but you just sometimes you devote more time to something that needs that attention, and other times you have to compensate where you're lacking. So yeah, this has been a great conversation. I love talking about everything, what you're doing, learning about your role. Where can people find you or connect with you if they're looking for roles or if they want to work with you in finding talent?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So you can feel free to definitely connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm on there daily. Mitch Robbins, Robbins. You could check out theanthonymichaelgroup.com. And lastly, I guess I would just shamelessly plug a podcast, if you don't mind. Which I have a lot of respect for you, Harsh, starting this up, because I know how much work is invested in making a show. But you could check out the MedTech Talent Lab podcast. The goal is we do a new topic on all things talent within the industry. Every Wednesday, we go live on LinkedIn at 11 o'clock Pacific, 2 o'clock Eastern. Or you could check out the MedTech Talent Lab podcast wherever you consume your podcast content. We have almost 70 episodes and have continued to interview a variety of best-in-class leaders straight from the industry on their own trials and tribulations in the space as well.
That's great. Now that you mentioned your podcast and you said 70, I have probably done like 8 or 10 episodes by now. So any tips you want to share with me of how I can improve and grow the podcast?
I would just say that the greatest episodes are the ones that are the most genuine. And so just a conversation like you and I have had today, where it's two people talking and really passionate about the topic, I think are the most genuine versus scripts. I would say consistency is key. Even if it doesn't seem like it's growing, I would just say the fact is that people are finding it, they are listening, they are getting value from the topics that you have on the show. And if you can stay consistent, I think that's the biggest key.
Yep. And that's what I've been focusing on. So it's great to hear. And again, I've got similar tips from others who are, have been launching or have been creating a lot of podcasts in the last 2 years or so. Again, thank you so much. It was great having you on. Any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
Just that I have a lot of respect for you. You've got a consistent content presence out there, constantly adding value for folks, especially in quality in medtech, and honored that you thought to enough of me to have me on the show. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. And we'll engage on LinkedIn or some other way. So wish you all the best for everything in your personal life and everything with Anthony Michael Group and your other projects.
Thanks, Harsh. You as well.
All right. Thank you.